Hello and welcome back to Her Rules Radio. I'm Alex Jamieson, your hostess, your creatrix guide. I'm a leadership coach to women in the sciences, arts, technology, engineering, and maths, what they're calling STEAM these days. Author, artist, podcaster, and this season of Her Rules Radio has a special focus inspired by my own creative journey and coaching professional women over the last 20 years. This season is here to help inspire you on your own creative and leadership journey. I've curated the guests specifically to support multi-passionate, multi-hyphenated women to gather their strengths, get clear, and reconnect to the creative wisdom and dreams that we've all got. It's for women who want to support and learn from other women on their creative and leadership journeys. And today's guest is going to help all of us, including myself. Jacquette Timmons tells us, and believe me, I've worked with her. Bob and I hired her to help us on our journey. Everyone reacts emotionally to money. Jacquette works as a financial behaviorist, and she's committed to getting us to see that you don't manage money, you manage your choices around money. She gives behavioral-based financial coaching and lots of good advice to even those of us who have been in business or have been in our professional field for a long time from all different income and wealth spectrums. She gives great workshops and keynotes. She does panels. She speaks to corporations and everybody is knocking on her door. She's got an MBA in finance and an undergrad in marketing from a design school. So every time I look at her website, I'm like, oh, that's pretty. And now I know why. And she really brings that creativity and that designer's mindset to you and your financial situation. She brings creativity and analysis and so much empathy. Jacquette, thank you so much for being here on Her Rules Radio.
Oh my goodness, Alex. I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So you are a very accomplished woman in your own right. And because you are an entrepreneur, mm-hmm. and you also went to design school, mm-hmm. you are in this umbrella of what I call pro creatives. You're a professional creative.
Yes.
So all the women I'm interviewing for this series, I call us multi-hyphenate pro creatives. We do mm-hmm. a lot of things. Mm-hmm. So if you had to stick together all the things hyphenated in a row, what would your long creative professional title be?
Oh my goodness. I think where I would start is why I applied to FIT in the first place and went to college at 16.
That's right. I just learned this about you.
Yeah. I wanted to be a shoe designer. And I drew well enough to get into FIT, but quickly discovered that the design part was just not my strength. Like compared to everyone else, it was just like, oh, you don't really know how to design. You don't really know how to draw. Like you might have some ideas, but your translation skills are not quite there. So I went to Plan B. And for me, Plan B, the initial thought was that, okay, well, then I will work in the shoe design space and I will do marketing there. And so at FIT, you have to do a co-op before you can graduate. And so my co-op was at Salvatore Ferragamo.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I met the Ferragamo family. I mean, everything you can think of. And if you can think of a showroom in the late 80s, it was all of those things. So I would say that was my first, in terms of hyphenate, it was recognizing that just because I was not able to draw as well as one needs to be able to do to be successful, I was able to translate that and then figure out at a very young age, I can still work in the creative space, but here's how. And then it switched again, another unintentional pivot, if you will, right before I was graduating undergrad. And that's where and when I would meet my mentor. And long story short, she hired me and then went to Wall Street and took me with her. And that's when I fell in love with this idea of money being a product and really began to see, oh, this is just like designing a pair of shoes, except for you're designing different financial instruments. You're designing derivatives, you're designing swaps, like you're designing financial products, but it still has to go through the same process that you would, or a similar process that you would if you're trying to get a pair of high-end shoes into someone's hands. So that was really for me, without recognizing it in that moment, I think in hindsight, that was when I really discovered that there's a creative element to everything. And we all are creatives, even if we aren't artistic. And creativity is all about how are you perhaps seeing things maybe differently than other people, but how are you seeing things and how are you connecting the dots and helping other people connect the dots as well?
Now, you're also a writer and you've written a book. And you also write a wonderful blog that you send out every Sunday night. And I know because I get them and I read them every Sunday night. And
I love hearing that. Thank you. Because, you write them and you're like, I have no idea.
Is anybody? I should really write back to my friends who I still read their newsletters and let them know, like, well, I loved this one. Like, we need that encouragement, don't we?
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
So as you were going through at such a young age, this kind of winding path of creativity and finding your place in the world and what you wanted to do, what you wanted to engage with, did you have someone in your life who was really supporting you and encouraging you to keep trying the things until you found it?
Oh, my mother, no doubt. My mother was my biggest cheerleader, my biggest advocate. And my mother was also creative. My mother for many years before I was born was a professional musician. And she continued that for a little bit after I was born. And then when my parents separated, she needed to retire from that and, get a job with Social Security, which she did. And I love sharing the story of how, growing up, obviously she would take local gigs and things like that, but she wouldn't travel. And when I graduated from high school, she started up 3 different bands. She started up a gospel choraleers, a jazz quartet, and a blues band. And she did that up until she was just physically unable to do so.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That I love stories like that, where we think that, once you hit middle age, like that's it. Your creative juices are dry. She had a whole second life.
Oh yeah, totally. Or a continuation of a life, right? It just was a pause. Yeah. But it was not anything that ever fully went away, other than the fact that it was no longer her profession and that was her only means of, earning money. So
yeah. Well, this show is called Her Rules Radio.
Uh-huh.
And just in the last few weeks, we've known each other for a few years now. And just in the last few weeks, I learned that you went to college early.
Yeah.
You were a young sprite.
Yes.
And, Her Rules is really all about like how we kind of need to walk our own path. Yes. We have to figure out how to, play by our own rules, or which rules to break, or, what are we going to do that may not be the prescribed path forward.
Mm-hmm.
So what's like an early moment that you remember? Maybe you're like, I've got to do something different. I'm a creative. I am, high school is just not for me. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to go to design school. What was that? What were that series of moments like for you?
So I think to put this into context, one of the things to note is that I was born in New York City and we lived here until I was about 7. And then we moved to a college town about an hour south of Buffalo. And that transition had me go from an environment and a neighborhood that was, using today's terms, multicultural, to an environment where I was one of only. So in my second grade, not even my grade, in my grade school, I was one of 2 Blacks. So I went from being in an environment where there were a lot of other people that looked like me to being, like I said, one of a few. So I think I've always, as a result of that, and then also, at that time, now not you're thinking, but this is going back when we moved, it was in the 70s. So 70s and the 80s, it was not as socially acceptable as it is today to be separated, to be on your way to divorce, to basically be a single woman, raising your child. That was not as acceptable. So there were so many different things that put a spotlight on what made me different. And so I won't say I got used to being different, but my difference was very much felt. And I think that for me, another part of my difference was I was smart. I mean, it took me a while to just kind of claim that, but I was smart. And that's how I was able to graduate at 16. And I just knew, I was like, I'm going to FIT. Like in high school, I worked at the mall. I sold shoes at the big store. And that's what got me interested in wanting to be a shoe designer. And I had to get permission from my mother to both graduate, and FIT needed her permission as well. But I was just like, this is what I want to do. And I was just single-minded about it.
That's amazing. I love it. I cast my mind back. I'm like, I did not even, that was not even a concept that I could like be done early. Oh, if only I had known. Well, you talk about your mom and the times when your folks separated. And it reminds me that my grandmother and my grandfather divorced when, it must have been late 60s, early 70s. And at that time, she couldn't even get a credit card by herself.
Exactly.
So I'm just connecting all these dots, talking about creativity and women and womanhood and motherhood and finances.
Yes.
Like this is really interesting recent history.
Exactly. Yes. And I think some people either they overlook it or they unfortunately discount it. Now I think about the fact that, my parents separated, but they didn't get divorced until I was 13. And I always wondered why. And I'm like, well, there probably were lots of reasons why.
Yeah.
And not all of it just because they didn't want to file the paperwork. You know what I mean?
Right. It's so complex.
Mm-hmm.
So I desperately want to talk with you about your expertise around money and value and creatives, because I know you've worked with a lot of creative professionals in your role as a financial behaviorist and I'll just say money coach writ large. But you as a creative, I'm so curious because you have all these different things that you do. You write, you coach, you speak, you do all kinds of cool things. With so many relationships and projects happening at the same time, how do you manage and support your own creative energies?
Well, how do I do it right now?
Sure. That's fine.
A good way to start because it's I think it evolves and there needs to be that flexibility for it to do so. The way that I manage my calendar right now is Monday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays are for coaching. Wednesdays and Fridays are a combination of like podcast days, interview days, writing, and admin time. That's how I ideally like to do it. I don't always have complete control over that because, sometimes like after our time together, I have a presentation that I'm doing for a corporation. So I don't always get control over that completely, but ideally that's the schedule. And the way that I approach my writing is I've learned to think thematically and think about what do I want to talk about each week as it pertains to the theme of the month. And so if I start the month knowing what the theme is, and then dissecting that between what's going to happen each week, I at least have an overarching idea of what I'm going to cover. And then when it's time to sit down and write, whether it's doing a little bit of research or just, some free flow writing, that's how I manage my time around that. When I'm preparing for a presentation, I borrow some approaches from my friends that are in the TV and movie industry, and that I do a table read. Oh. So before I even start with creating a presentation deck, I actually, using Post-it notes, do like a table read. Like, all right, I know what the end result is and I know where I want people to go, but how do I get there? And I kind of reverse engineer it. And I, use the Post-it notes because then I practice and I change it all around. And then that's when I start to build the deck. And I build a visual deck. I don't typically have much text in my presentations. So I do that because I need to have an understanding of, when I'm going through the presentation, what was my purpose for having that picture? Either what's the point that it's helping me to make, or what's the emotion that I want it to evoke?
Yeah. So that early design education is really woven throughout your work. I love that.
Totally.
So tell our listeners about what it means to be a financial behaviorist, because I will say from experience, having worked with you, Bob and I came to you and we're like, we need a little help wrangling our mindset around money. And it was so helpful. And you asked really beautiful questions, and they just helped us come together and really get it. I'm going to use the word alignment. Yeah. Help us get aligned. And what is the kind of overarching work that you do, especially with, I'll say, entrepreneurs and professional creatives?
So, I think regardless of how I am showing up in terms of what hat, the whole message is that if success with money were purely a mathematical problem, everybody would have more than what they wanted or needed, because at the end of the day, 2 + 2 is going to always equal 4. But given that we've got different experiences happening, we get different results, there's something else going on. And for me, that something else is greatly tied to your individual behavior, your choices, the motivations and the emotions that drive that, in the context of what are some of the systemic choices that are being had as well. And so for me, when I'm working with people, whether it's with their money personally or with regards to that in their business, it's really helping to get a clear understanding of what it is that you want money to do for you first. So what's your vision? And then coming up with a game plan to make that vision a reality. And if we're talking about your business, making sure that the way that your business is currently structured, your business model, your sales process, the way you approach pricing is designed in such a way that it doesn't just set your business up to be successful and to be a thriving entity, but that it is automatically integrating the health of your personal finances too. So my perspective when it comes to business is, and I've learned this the hard way, lead with the personal first. Lead with what you need to happen in your personal finances first, and design a business to support that.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad you brought that up. Okay. I'm going to bookmarking that idea real quick, because I actually have that as a later question for you.
Okay.
You're so good at really getting to the truth with people and money and what they want. And I'm going to come at it in a roundabout kind of way, because you and I were talking about, what would be the most valuable things to share of you and your expertise in this interview today. And we started talking about the myth of the poor creative, the poor starving artist. And I know this myth very well because I grew up with one. My dear mother, an amazing artist, declared bankruptcy twice.
Wow. Okay.
So tell us about what this myth is, just in case people don't know what I'm talking about, and how can we get rid of that in ourselves?
Yeah. So for those unfamiliar with the myth, basically what it says is that you are not a true artist if you are financially successful. That only the true artists are those that are broke and struggling. And we typically, hear that in the professional creative spaces, but where else we hear it? In the startup world.
Yes.
Because, if you're going out for financing, certain folks won't invest in you unless you have the story of sleeping on your friend's sofa for, 2 years before you got something. And yeah, I understand we may have to go through some lean and challenging times, but that shouldn't be the thing that we're aiming for. So the myth is, this idea of that the value of your art in whatever way it appears is not great if you are also doing well. And one of the things that I always say is, it took a lot of money to keep Michelangelo painting. It took a lot of money to keep Mother Teresa doing her thing and Mahatma Gandhi doing don't fall for it, people. A, and then B, why should you have to, sabotage your financial well-being in order for there to be quote unquote value to what you are creating and giving to the world? Like, to me, it doesn't make sense that those have to be contradictory. Like, you should be able to do your work, do it well, and get paid well for it.
You just reminded me, it's an interesting double-edged sword that you have to be broke and struggling for your art to be good. And if you succeed, you're called a sellout.
Yes.
So you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, right?
Exactly.
It's like
Exactly. And what I find so interesting is that, and I'm making a huge generalization here, so I will own that.
Sure.
The people that are, criticizing you for selling out rarely are the ones that are buying your work.
Hypocrisy. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm going to bring it back to what you said a moment ago. Like, what do you want your money to do for you? And, a lot of us, we want money so that we can be well, right? We want to eat. We want to live comfortably. We want to feel good. We don't want to be in that starvation mode, which is very uncomfortable. It's terrifying. It's traumatic if it goes on for too long. So what kind of art can really be created from that place?
Exactly. Because then you're not creating from a space of what I like to call fullness. Right. And so it's just like, I would not show up to have my time here with you. I would not show up to a presentation or a coaching call, not doing the things that I know make me show up so that I can be my best and give my best so I can be full. Right. And everybody has different things in terms of what makes them feel full. But if you're not operating from a space of fullness, then the quality of what you are giving is going to be diminished.
Yeah. Now, there's another aspect to this, which I have definitely struggled with in the past. I will say it's getting better as I learn more. I've been an author for a long time, and I've done a lot of things for a long time. And only recently have I been selling my paintings. So, I thought I had this whole money and worth thing figured out. And then I started selling my paintings, and I'm like, oh, who am I to put more than $20 on a painting to sell, right? So let's talk about separating the art from the selling. How can we help me do this? Basically, I'm asking for coaching right now. But I know a lot of people need this conversation. So.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. So, the question embedded in your question is, what should I charge for this? A, but embedded in that is, am I charging quote unquote what I'm worth? And I always like to push back on this whole notion of that language of charging what you're worth, because I think it does much more damage to us than perhaps we know. So for example, I'm Black for people who don't know. I'm Black. My heritage is Jamaican American. And so when people say charge what you're worth, for me, I viscerally have a reaction because I have an ancestral history where money has been connected to people's humanity. So I vehemently oppose this idea of charge what you are worth when people, whether they recognize it or not, are tying that to a person and not to what that person has created. Very different. The person is still connected to what's being created, but they're not the creation. And whether you are creating a piece of art that, like what you do, that someone can hang in their wall at home, in their office, whether someone is creating a book and people can consume it in writing, whether someone's creating an experience, those things, the end product is either helping someone address a problem, answer a question, address a frustration, fulfill a desire. that is what you are pricing. And the ingredients that go into that pricing certainly come from you, because it's a combination of your education, both formal and informal, your perspective, your expertise, your gifts, your talents. Yes, but it's not you. And so, that's the emotional part of the pricing piece, right? The other thing that I think is a part of pricing is really recognizing that whatever number you come up with, it's really a combination of three things all wrapped into one, right? Because it represents a financial number. There's an emotional reaction to it, both for you and the person that's buying it. And everybody's bringing their own personal history to money to the situation. So when I'm working with people to set their pricing, I'm helping them to recognize that your price is really a reflection of your relationship with money, your relationship with yourself, your relationship with your business, and the relationship you have or that you want to have with your folks. On the other end, while you may not know the details, it's the same is true for the person that's doing the buying. They've got a relationship with money. That price is triggering some sort of relationship, some identity, right? So their relationship with themselves. And, the identity piece could just simply be, when I buy this, does it make me feel wealthy? Does it make me feel attractive? Does it make me feel like I'm in the in crowd? Those are all of the things that pricing is doing that you need to take into account.
Man, it's so interesting to hear you talk about this now that I know about your history with shoe designing. Because I think about, there are some shoes out there that are the most amazing works of art that I have had a visceral, emotional reaction to, and some kind of spiritual healing when I put them on my body.
I do understand.
It makes me think, I owe Dolly Parton $10 million in therapy for some of her songs, right? That's what's swirling around in my mind right now as you're talking. It really does place art or whatever your art is. Your art could be business coaching. Your art could be painting. Your art could be writing marketing language. Your art that you bring to the world, really think about. Okay, so Jacquette, how do you help people think about and land on that number? Because some of the work that we may be putting out there may be totally life changing for people.
Yeah. So the challenge is you don't know for whom it's going to be life changing, right? So you don't really have control over that. But here's how I suggest people approach it. And again, going back to what I said at the start of our conversation with regards to knowing what it is that you want money to do for you personally. And so if you're thinking of your art as a business, so let me just pause for a second because and take a little side route, but it's related. I did a session yesterday for other creatives, writers. And the thing that I pointed out to them is that there's the discipline of writing, and then there's the discipline of running a business of writing, right? And the same is true for an artist. There's what you do to create your art, and then there's what you do to manage the business that distributes your art, if you will. So if we think about it as your business that distributes your art, you've got to then think about it from the standpoint of, what am I creating? Am I creating only one type of art? And if I am I creating it at different price points? Because one of the things that I try to get people to do, and this is me leaning into my former days of managing money, is I tend to think and through the lens of a portfolio. And so just like in a portfolio, every asset has a job. So what's the job of each of the different things that and like in your instance, you paint. I know you paint small things. I know you paint large things. I know you paint customized things. The challenge is coming up with the price point for each of those, but then also making sure that whatever the price point that you come up with, that it makes sense as a story. Because if you want someone to start here, but then you want them to go here, and then you want them to commission you for a customized piece, each price point has to tell a different story and make it interesting and plant the seed for, I want to go there next. So that's not a concrete answer in terms of do A, B, C, or D, but just theoretically, I think that that's how you have to approach it.
Well, I love that it's an answer without the specifics because it reminds me that running a creative business really requires presence and thought and some contemplation.
You have to be intentional. You have to be just as intentional about the business of it as you are about how you go about creating what you create.
Mm-hmm. So remember how I bookmarked a comment that you spoke earlier. So I wanted to get to this series that you wrote recently about branding and messaging.
Yeah.
So even though you readily say that you're not a branding expert, you had some real wisdom to share about branding and messaging. Instead, you were talking about knowledge and personality. So I feel like this is there's kind of a tie into what we were just talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm quoting you directly here. You said differently, it's when your talents, gifts, education, expertise, and personality coalesce to help you solve problems for other people as only you can do.
Yeah.
And that is really like, I want people to sit with that. You're all the artists, all the creatives that are listening now, like you're bringing all of your talents and experience and knowledge, and you're solving problems for other people as only you can do. Even if there's a million other watercolorists out there, and believe me, I watch all their YouTube videos, I know who they are, but there's something about my history, right? You were talking about our money history, our emotional reaction, our personal history. It all comes together.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is a point of struggle for many multi-talented creatives.
Yes.
How to brand and market ourselves when we're being told we have to like pick a niche.
Right.
And tell us more about this knowledge and personality that you wrote so beautifully about.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So, one way I want to answer that is my own reaction to this whole notion of picking a niche. I've never been good at that.
Good. It's not just me.
I've never been good at that. And until I realized that the way other people were defining niche, I think I was doing it, but I was just defining it very differently. So for me, my niche is that I talk about the human side of money. So everywhere I go, that's what I'm doing. That's my niche. I think for a lot of people, when they say niche, they're talking about functionally what it is that you do. And I've never, ever, ever wanted to give up my speaking. I've been speaking since 1996 professionally. I've never wanted to give up my one-on-one coaching. When everybody was, suggesting that you do, and this is not a knock to people. So please, listeners, don't hear it as that. It's just not what worked for me. When people were like, oh, but that's not enough leverage. You should be doing group coaching and things like that. That was not my thing. And even with the events, I do 2 events. But if someone were to look at my business, they might say, well, she's not niche enough because she's a for-hire speaker. She does one-on-one coaching. She hosts events. She writes. If you're defining niching by the functionality, I'm not the one that can support you on that. If you're defining niching by what it is you want to be known for, the conversation that you want to have, but in a variety of different ways, ooh, let's go, because I'm all for that.
I love that. Well, and it really honors an aspect of how people learn and process, right? Like some of us learn and process in very different ways. And some of us learn one way, but process another way, if that makes sense.
Yes,
like
totally.
Some of us like to listen to words in order to really hear them. Some of us need to read words, and there's people like me who need both.
Yeah, I need to see. I always, warn, I guess, my clients that I'm going to always ask them to think on paper, and I'm going to always draw what I'm thinking, because that's how I am able to see things. I'm able to see what I'm hearing. I'm also able to then discern what is not being communicated, but what I'm hearing, if that makes any sense. So it helps me to see what's quote unquote obvious and what's less obvious. So I'm always thinking on paper.
Yeah. Interesting. So with all of the industries that you've been in, and you work with people, right? You coach people from all different walks of life, all different professions, which must be so interesting, right?
And that's another thing. I love that. So when they talk about niching, right? I don't want to give up the fact that one day I could be talking to a PhD. The next day I could be talking to an artist. The next day I could be talking to an engineer. I don't want to give that up.
Right. Yeah. That's so cool. Well, so who in your life, either historically or currently, who inspires you?
It's going to always be the first person that comes to mind is going to always be my mother.
Yeah.
It's going to always be her because, yes, from the fact that she was a professional artist, but I also just think from the way she lived her life and the way that, she didn't go around with a clarion horn saying this, but just again, by the way she lived her life, she just lived her life on her own terms, right? I don't remember precisely how I worded it, but in my book, I quote her because I think it's something along the lines of dancing to your own beat or something like that. And definitely that was my mother. Now, growing up, I didn't always appreciate that because I wanted her to be like everybody else's mother.
Oh my goodness. I don't know what that's like at all.
Like, why can't you be like so-and-so's mom? But my God, man, do I appreciate it now and really see it for the blessing that it is and was for sure.
Oh my gosh. Can I just tell you, I so just wanted my mom to be normal, whatever that means.
I know.
I don't even know who I would have picked to model a mother on, but oh my gosh, my mom made like homemade potato bread and like sewed my clothing out. I'm like, she was so ahead of her time and she was so cool. And I so wish I had appreciated her at the time.
Yes.
Wah, wah.
Oh
Okay.
my God.
Mom, I love you. I'm sorry.
I know, right? I'm doing the same.
We're both just looking skyward.
I know.
That's all right. They know it. They knew it was going to happen eventually.
Exactly.
So what advice did you get along the way in your career that really stuck with you that you would maybe share with us?
Oh my goodness. Well, I can tell you that the inspiration for, especially when I work with entrepreneurs and small business owners, to also getting them to prioritize their personal financial health is because my CPA one time said to me, I need you to stop mortgaging your life. And basically that was his way of saying, you need to stop putting your business first because we're taught you earn the money and you reinvest it all in the business, right? And so that would be the first thing. Like, here's what I want to say. You can have a successful business and, let's use for this example, success in terms of it's profitable, it's cash flow positive. And so you're like, oh yeah, I'm doing great. But if at any point you took money from your personal savings to either start your business, get it through a rough patch, or help take it to the next level, if you are not paying yourself or you're not paying yourself as much as you could, given how well the business is doing, and that's not intentional, if you put pause on any long-term investing and your intent was to only have it be for a minute and now it's 60 minutes, if you've done any of that or you are doing any of that, that means that you have mortgaged your life in some way, shape, or form. And I want people to stop doing that.
Thank you. That's very helpful because, how am I going to say this? I'm just going to say it. I'm not going to filter myself. There's a lot of advice out there given to entrepreneurs, given to professional creatives, take out, use your credit cards, empty out your savings account, start your business. You have to take it to the next level. I've seen a lot of people spend all their savings or go into debt for that.
Yes. And I hate that messaging. I hate that people say, if you don't do that, that means that you're not committed. Right. No, that's crazy. It's mean you're being smart and strategic.
Yeah, it's toxic.
Oh my God. Yeah.
It really plays on people's insecurities and I don't like it.
I am with you there.
Okay, good. So I have this question for you specifically. And I wonder if it's because of your early, the early art and, growing up with an artist mom like you had. How do you balance your creative confidence with and this is my perception, so tell me if I'm wrong, but it feels like you also have a very open, curious mind, like beginner's mind, like you want to learn, you're always willing to learn some. So how do you balance that creative confidence with this like beginner's mindset?
So you are right in your observation. My mother used to call me Rona Barrett, and you probably have to be of a certain age to know why that's
Why do I
relevant.
know that name? What is that?
Oh my God, because she was the news person back in the 70s that everybody was just like, oh, she's so darn nosy. Because I was always like, why, mommy? Why? Like, and ask why. And then she'd answer, why, mommy? And, it was just like, it was never ending. So she was like, oh God, Rona Barrett. So I have always been a curious person. I've always asked a lot of questions. So I think that's why I just naturally do it now. It's also why I think in social settings, I don't do so well at small talk, because I want to get past the small talk and get to the juicy stuff. So I think the curiosity is always there. I think in terms of the confidence piece, that's an ongoing practice. So for example, I've got an idea for another book, and my current agent was like, not really feeling it. And that was a blow. Like, I'm like, this is a great idea.
How dare you?
How dare you? So I would say the confidence wavers, but it's, the curiosity is ongoing. The confidence wavers. And sometimes the confidence, is an internally driven thing, and it doesn't matter what other people say. And other times that's just not true. It does matter what someone says, because if your agent's like, oh, I'm not feeling it, then you're like, okay, either I need to get a new agent, or I need to like think about this a little bit more and think about how do I make it more mass marketing appeal, So yeah. I don't know if that really answers your question, but.
Well, no, that's really helpful, because it's a good reminder of how many creatives that we, have made it big, successful creatives, like an incredible album or an amazing book that, turned into a huge series and became 10 movies. A lot of those were not like right out of the gate accepted as a great idea.
Right.
Right. I mean, I'll say, Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling, like, right. She got rejected by so many publishers. And that kind of story is rampant out there. And I have lots of artist friends and musician friends who are like, oh my God, like I've had this idea I've been working on and pitching for years.
Mm-hmm.
And it still hasn't taken hold, or it's gotten a little bit better along the way, but it's been a process.
Yes.
So I think it's just helpful to remind us all that our first idea may not be the best iteration of that idea. It may need some work, and we may need to share it with other people who can contribute to it. Or maybe we just need to find a new agent. I don't know.
Yes, it could be a combination.
It could be. I'll keep all options on the table, people.
Yes.
So I think one last realm of question I have for you is about your creative dreams. And, you're talking about the possibility of another book at some point. Where would you like to be, or what would you like to achieve in the next 5 years, whether it's with this current business and iteration and how you create and work with people in the world, or if there's another aspect that you want to bring in?
So there are two things that I am trying to figure out the next steps for. One is the book idea. And then another is, I know people are going to be like, yet another one, a financial app, but one that is not just about, tracking your money or helping you to save more or helping you to get out of debt, but one that would really help to heighten your awareness around your behavior and your choices. And I haven't quite figured out how to do that in the form of an app, but I think that has legs. We'll see.
I love that. Yeah, I need something that I don't want anything punitive. Like I don't want something to shock me electrically when I spend something frivolous. I don't want that.
And I never wanted, I always tell people, I will never, ever tell you, I will never, make you feel judged, make you feel shamed about anything. And I will also never tell you that your dream is not good. What I will say, if you've got this really, really big dream and I think your timeline is crazy, I'll tell you that. I'll tell you your dream is not possible.
Okay. I appreciate that about you. I like that. It's a little bit of like cheerleading with, let's be reasonable here.
Yes. Yeah.
Jacquette, where should people go follow you and get more about you? And I highly recommend your newsletter. I just want to call that out again to people. So they go sign up at your website. But what are your favorite places for people to interact with you?
I love me some Instagram. I know everybody's like, or not everybody, but a lot of people are like, I'm tired of social media. I love me some Instagram. So come hang out with me on Instagram, send me a DM, a voice message or whatever, totally open to that. And then in terms of my website, if you want to do the financial wheel exercise, which is a great way to either create your financial vision or get reconnected with it. And then that will also put you on the newsletter. You can just go to jacquettetimmons.com/wheel.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes. I did the wheel with my husband, with you as our coach. Yeah. It was very helpful. So I highly recommend you go check that out. Jacquette, thank you again so much for being here, for sharing all your wisdom, your insights, your fun stories. It's a pleasure to have you.
Oh my goodness, Alex. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here and I'm really delighted. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Did you like today's episode? You should go leave a review. Hey, it really helps us out. I would so appreciate it. Do us a solid. Go leave a review wherever you love listening to your podcasts. It could be iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify or whatever. Anyway, if you're interested in some coaching with me one-on-one, go on over to bit.ly/coachmealex or go to alexandrajameson.com. And thanks for listening. Totally appreciate you. Be sure to tune in next week for more goodness. See you soon. Mwah.